I think we had two, and then we didn't record the first one or the second or something. Yeah.
We recorded something though, didn't we?
Yeah, we recorded one of the two, but I think we missed one of them, which is too bad. But
right.
Yeah, I'm recording right now, so just.
Okay, good. Did you just start just now?
It's really easy now on Skype. It's just one click. So yeah.
So you just started now.
Just started.
Yeah. So let me see. So I was mentioning. So you haven't heard the James Joyce through Ion one?
No, I haven't heard that. I think I heard one of them. I think it was Evergreen, but that was I heard that a long time ago. But I should listen again if you want to. If you want to, I don't think I've listened to all of them.
Okay, I'll send the two. I'll send them to you.
What was the reaction like from the New York Society? Yeah.
Well, the guy who ran it, Murray Gross. See, first of all, we moved to New York in. Carolyn went there in spring of '93, and I didn't get there till August. And I was staying at Jerry Fialko's, and Carolyn was staying. We basically landed in America on February 15th, '93. And Jerry, you know the name Jerry Fialka? You might have heard of him.
I talked to him. He gave me his his standard template interview.
That bullshit. That fucking I will not talk to him because of that shit. That is so fucking ridiculous. He gets some good people sometimes. He wastes them with these fucking stupid things. And
I wanted to talk to him too, but yeah.
Anyways, you don't get to. You don't get to. He wastes a lot of opportunities, but. I don't know. He's either insecure or he's ridiculous. Anyways, I had enough of him 10 years ago. I said, "That's it, Jerry. Fuck you. You know, you won't fucking give up. You won't get interested in Ion. You don't fucking know what's happening. Goodbye." And he now talks to Clinton. Do you know who Clinton is? Clinton Ignatoff?
I don't.
Okay. Well, Clinton's a young guy, and we have a radio show on Wednesdays, which you're invited to be part of anytime. You could check it out. It's called Office Hours. You know, in college, you know, the teachers have office hours when you can come and talk to the teachers, you know. Right. You know, so we call our show Office Hours. We're a bunch of experts who let anybody in after they listen to us for 5 hours. Then we let them in. But Clinton helps Jerry. I introduced them, or he met Jerry. Noticed me hanging out with Clinton, so he said, "Oh, here's a young whippersnapper that can do technical stuff, so I'll get him to help me." So they became friends, and Clinton helps. But Clinton told me the other day, Jerry says he wants to do the thing on you, Bob, and you could yell at him, spit on him, tell him to go fuck himself, whatever you want. He just wants to run through those damn questions with you. And I ain't going to do it. It's so stupid.
Does he have a master plan with all that? Like, he must have hours and hours of interviews with people answering those questions.
Lazy. He's fucking lazy. Yeah, he's got a lot of interviews he's done, but he's just lazy. And, you know, it gets people, all those questions are unanswerable. It's just content choices. It's all subjective. Fuck that. Talk about what people think they know. You know, that's the interesting thing. They don't really know anything, but you can put it on. Like we're going to do right now, put on our knowledge, right? So why am I talking about Jerry?
So any back to New York with the society, the Finnegan.
Yeah. So what happened is that we show up. He picks us up at the airport, February 15, 1993. We've left Toronto, and we come to the mailbox at his place, and he opens it, and there's a letter from Reverend Stang. You know who that is? Church of Jesus. It's a letter from Stang, and so this is the first thing I encounter, is a letter from Stang telling Jerry, who he thinks is a member of the Church of Genius, but isn't, but Jerry had featured an interview between me and his friend Phil Chamberlain, which we had done a while before, but he got it on the radio like in January '93. So Stang... his spies reported that I was on the radio, and he was pissed off at the album and everything. So he called up Jerry, excommunicated him from the Church of Genius, even though Jerry wasn't a member, and told him, "Don't put Bob on the radio again." That was my first encounter of the states moving there, you know, to live there indefinitely, was a letter from Stang. And what did we? I don't. the next day, Negative Land, one of the guys from Negative Land got on the phone with him. And he...
on the phone with Jerry.
Jerry, yes. So somehow they got talking. I don't know what. Maybe Stang complained. But see, Negative Land was part of the problem because the guy who put out the album, Negative Land is on the second album. And they got mad. Stang got mad at them, so they denied they did it. They claimed they were ripped off, all this stupid stuff. But I know the guy that got them in there, Jerry Belanger, so I know the real story. So he's talking to Jerry about me, and I'm sitting there Jerry's got the speakerphone. I'm sitting there my second day there, and I'm listening to Negative Land go on saying bullshit about me. So I never said anything, but I heard what his side of his defense is. And so I don't know if Jerry talked to Stang in any form, but he just basically ignored Stang. So that's just an anecdote. It's symbolic of a lot of stuff that this letter excommunicated me from American media in the first minute I get to the States. So we moved to New York to do this incredible technology mirror, which actually treated AIDS, and there was a study for it. And I'll say a couple of things as I go along here that are good for the public record. The Shah of Iran's nephew funded the first study in '88, and it was successful with 25 people until 17 of them decided to get on the AZT, which Fauci had just put out in '88, and they all died. And the ones who stayed on the technology, which was called MIR, M-I-H-R, for magnetically influenced herbal remedies, very interesting technique. They survived, but and then the National Institute of Health was interested in this, so they went there in April. And the NIH says, yeah, we're going to do a study on this. But the FDA guy was sitting in the background. He said, you're not doing any study of any alternatives or anything like this, sort of like Fauci speaking. And so they stopped it. So Carolyn just opened a clinic in New York, and they treated people very well for several years until the medical mafia of New York City, who Mario Cuomo had stopped hassling, legislative-wise, had stopped them hassling alternatives. So that's why Carolyn and her friend could do it. Her friend was the widow of Walter because he died in August '93, a few months after the meeting. So that was unfortunate, but Carolyn and his widow carried on. So it's a long story, but somehow I found out about this Finnegan's Wake Society. So in the fall of '93, I joined it, and it was run by Nick, can't remember his last name, but as I eventually got to know him over the next couple of years, he was at the University of Dallas when Eric was there in the '70s, and they were in the same class together. And Nick was on. Eric McLuhan, yeah. And so Nick went on to make several encyclopedic books of Joyce stuff. He's a Joyce scholar and got books published. But he told me he couldn't stand Eric. He didn't understand anything what Eric was saying, I'm pretty sure. But he didn't like Eric's personality. So it was funny that I show up at this group that's formed by a guy who knew Eric. And so as I gradually brought out the Thunders, Eric's stuff about the Thunders and all that in the group, he got intrigued by this. Most of them did, and they didn't understand me, but they listened. So Nick eventually was forced to hear a proper translation of Eric to him who had resisted Eric, 20 years before in the '70s. So that was an interesting coincidence. But then Nick got so involved with making these Joyce books, he had to quit. So Murray Gross, former FBI guy, took over.
Yes.
And Murray is famous. Frank, somebody who ran the DA office in the late '60s, Murray figured out that the mafia was doing something with securities in a new way that nobody was aware of. So he investigated them, found them, charged them or whatever, and then he testified in Congress, which is on the record. But he lived in Soho. This is in late '60s when nobody's really down there yet. It's just industrial warehouses. He had a place there on Spring Street or Prince Street, and he quit the FBI for some reason, but he's right there by Mulberry where the mafia is, and they know who he is. So he said he spent the next 2 years getting in his car every morning, turning on the ignition, and not knowing whether it's going to blow up or not. It never blew up, but he knew it could easily have happened, so he survived that. And then his wife, who was a lawyer in the United Nations, they went to Switzerland, did stuff in Switzerland, then they came back. And then he was always intellectually curious, so he found out about Finney's Wake and joined Nick's group. And then he took over because he was the most regular guy. He didn't have a job, so he was available to do the administrative stuff. So that's in late 93. So by 95, Murray and I have become friends, and he's a bit intrigued with the McLuhan stuff. He doesn't understand it. He hasn't read anything yet, but he also resists it. So when I played the 45-minute or so interview with Joyce, there were like 20 people there, 20, 25 people. Most of them I noticed after I stopped playing it, they talked about other stuff. But Murray came over and said, Bob, if this is true, this is fucking amazing. But he didn't know if it was true or not. You know, you can't tell. How do you know?
So when was the recording made?
In January or April 95. I think April, because I went out and stayed with Michael Blake Reed. He was on the border of British Columbia and Washington in a place called White Rock. And he lived there, and I spent a couple of days there having private sessions, you know, a whole bunch of them over a few days. And I did a panel there, but I won't go into that. That's interesting. I can send you the panel. But I did 2 panels, and then that's in January, and then I did April 95, and I think I did Joyce in April 95, not in January, where I did a bunch of things. I'll just say one panel. The second panel is we take the articles, the mind of Lyndon LaRouche as a physicist, whatever he claimed to be, a scientist, and I went through history. I got I brought in Kepler to talk about LaRouche's ideas. Then I brought in Pound to do the poetry of science.
Oh.
Then I did McLuhan, the media of science, or media science. Then I brought in Edison to do science because he did a lot of inventing, and I brought in Nelson Rockefeller to do the business of managing science. You know, the oligarchy, how they dealt with new technologies, and let's see, I did 8 people. So I did, I brought in Jesus. Or they called him the Nazarene, the Evergreens. And he did psychic science, healing and whatever he could do. So it's pretty incredible, right? I've got a science, Kepler. Then I've got a poet science, Pound. Then I got a media science, McLuhan. Then I've got science, Edison, inventor science. And then business science, Rockefeller. And then number 6 is, who did I just say? Somebody else. Jesus, Nazarene, psychic science. Did I mention him? So you got here, you've got...
7, is it?
Yeah, Kepler, Pound, McLuhan, Rockefeller, Edison, that's 5.
And
Jesus is 6. So there might be one. There's one other guy, and then the Evergreen said, since you did Edison, you got to do Tesla. So we brought in Tesla, and that opened it up into a lot of futuristic stuff with Tesla talking about it. But Edison made his official apology to Tesla on my session, on my panel for all history. He apologized for being such an asshole with Tesla. He admitted it, So I reconciled Tesla. People are still arguing about that. I fucking reconciled them. Oh, where's the recognition? Where's my Nobel Peace Prize? Nothing yet so far, but later there will be. So I wonder what the 8th guy would be.
I'm interested in what Pound had to say.
Oh, it's amazing. They all did what they knew. They talked in their knowledge. They're all distinctive. What could it be? Edison, Tesla, McLuhan. Maybe I brought in Joyce. I'm not sure because. I don't know who. I did a previous panel with Krishnamurti, Duchamp, McLuhan, and Dr. Beater. 4 guys. And in the middle of it, the Evergreen, and we were talking about top-down stuff a lot, and But there was other stuff, Krishnamurti. They all expressed what they're known as. You could tell what they are. Duchamp had his unique view, and they're all different. But then the Evergreens said, this is the first time they ever did it. This is before the 8 people one I just mentioned. They say, okay, you've been talking to these people. President Eisenhower would like to get some words in. Bring it, Ike. No problem, bring it, Ike. And Ike wants to explain his famous comment about the military-industrial complex. So he lays out that, you know what I mean? He states what he meant or something. And I haven't heard it in a long time, but I'll send you these 2 things. They're really good. And no one has done panels like that in the New Age mediumship world, right? Who has ever done that?
I know. It's weird that wouldn't occur to other people, right?
Well, they're so ridiculous. They just steal concepts of the New Age divinity bullshit that they do, and most of it's a lie or it's fake. You know what I mean? With the Evergreens, it's not fake. You get the person. My Zappa interviews are incredible with him after he died. I did a great one with Tim Leary. I'll send them to you. You're interested in all this kind of stuff too, so I think you should.
Sure, yeah. I met Leary once in Toronto, but it's weird.
Have you ever seen me and Nelson were at Leary's house in '93 and that dialogue?
No.
Oh, yeah, I guess they did. That was incredible.
Those were around the same time. Might have been '92 that he went to Toronto. He was doing his virtual reality tour at that time. You remember that? Right.
Well, I first saw him do that in 1980. He was at the comedies, Zucklux or Yuck Yucks. He was at Yuck Yucks in 1980, April 1980. I went to see him, and he was just back, he'd gotten out of prison in '76, so he was starting to go around. He started to be a comedian, tried to be a comedian. So he's at Yuck Yucks. So in the question period, I brought up McLuhan to see what he'd say, because I knew what he had said about McLuhan in the '60s. And he says, oh, yeah, he just lives down the street there, and he just didn't say much. He just said he knew he lived down the street or something. So nothing happened there. But then 13 years later, I'm in his home. And while we're waiting for him to come out of his bedroom in the morning, this was May 15th or 16th, whatever is the Saturday of that weekend in '93, I see a copy of Take Today. So I pull it down, and there's a statement by Corinne to him, giving him a copy of the book. And I think maybe no date, but it had to be once Marshall was ill, which was in 1980. So Leary may have gotten in touch coincidentally or on purpose in 1980 when I saw him at Yuck Yucks, and she gave him a book. Or he showed up in '92 when you saw him, and he got the book then. You know what I mean? Which was a year before I see the book. So I don't know if you ever read it, but there's a lot more to say. I'm not going to go any more about that. So that's Leary. It's just that halfway through the interview, he freaked out. He couldn't take what I was saying. He ran out of the room, and the camera followed him. And so this footage didn't get broadcast, but we have it in the archives. Nelson has, I think. They go into the room. And he's answering his voicemail, his answer machine. And they go, what's going on? He says, I got to check my messages. So it's bullshit. He was just trying to collect his thoughts. So he comes back in. So the second half of the interview is him sitting there holding the mic up to his mouth. It's not clipped to his shirt because he took it off. And he gets real silly. So when the woman was editing it at a place in Century City, for a long time, a lot of people in Hollywood industries who were in the editing rooms there saw it. And she said it became a big hit. Everybody would come around and would look at the editing. They couldn't believe, because they all had a big iconic view of Leary, they couldn't believe these 2 assholes from Canada were kind of making him look ridiculous, And so that's incredible. That's footage of him in the answer in his bedroom, getting his voicemail, and then the other things he did. So he doesn't come across very well.
He honestly didn't come across very well when I saw him in Toronto either. He's he's got that side to him.
Well, he's sort of a bit damaged by the drugs or something. He was a bit off. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's or something.
That's what I thought too. Like he was on his shtick about virtual reality, and he didn't want to be questioned or have any critical comment put to him about that, which is very strange.
And he was showing a picture of McLuhan. He retrieved McLuhan as the new Socrates, right? Do you remember that part?
I don't remember that part, but that wouldn't surprise me. But yeah.
Right. So I saw him in '93, around the time that I went to his home. Somewhere in there, he did a talk, and I went to it with Jerry and that, and it was just a simple praising McLuhan and talking about, information wants to be free, it's going to be wonderful, and all this stuff. All these humanist values he was projecting on. No clue for that we'd end up with Biden, a fucking zombie president.
Yeah.
So that night, it was some big place in L.A. I was over by the bar, and I was now on radio in L.A. And so this is like May, June '93 or something. And this guy at the bar was telling people, he says, "Oh man, I was listening to Roy of Hollywood last night, and they had this guy on, unbelievable. The guy talked about May, Brussels, LaRouche, McLuhan, video. He talked, and he listed off about 20 things that I talked about. He said, I've never heard anybody talk about so many different things. So I knew he was talking about me. And then he goes at the end, and he says, I just love L.A. And what really, he loved the discarnate state of radios, actually. It wasn't L.A., right?
Yeah.
I love radio, he should have said. But he said, I love L.A. So I came over to him, I said, hey, you know that guy that you were talking about, you heard last night? Yes, that was me. He goes, what? So we had a nice interaction. That he saw me in the flesh, the guy that he was archetypalizing. So
what? Just to get back to the Joyce.
I didn't finish that. Yeah, I got to get back to that.
What did he reveal, like through the mediumship?
That's what in the first interview. Okay, so I told you that Murray thought it was fantastic, and but he didn't know whether to believe it or not. So he was more of an ally from that point on. And the others, they didn't know what to make of me or anything. They were silly. But by 2000, so from 19 to 2000. We moved up to City Island, so I couldn't show up at the. It was too far away for me to go at night. I'd miss the subway and everything, so I stopped going through the 2000s. But then, 8-9 years ago, he was still going, so I used to phone in and participate once I was here. And after a while, I heard him saying, "Well, you got to," and he started talking this McLuhan media stuff. And I was amazed. And when everybody went home and we were still on the phone, I said, Murray, you're fucking using my stuff. What are you doing? He says, yeah. He says, yeah, Bob, in the 10 years you were gone, as I got more and more familiar with the book, I started to see, holy shit, this media thing is real. It's just because he didn't know enough. But as you get further along, get very familiar with it, you actually get bored with that levels you understand. You're looking for new levels. He eventually either got Eric's stuff or he just read McLuhan, and he started talking McLuhan stuff. And when I was in 2000, by the time I left, they were giving me a lot of shit. We don't want to hear about McLuhan, okay? And Murray, because he ran the thing, he had to be diplomatic. So he didn't say that he secretly was interested in it, or even that he found the mediumship interesting. But privately, he was working through. And then there were new people from 2001 to 2014 or so, when I started calling in again, that didn't know about his position on McLuhan. So he could say it to them, and they wouldn't know that he disagreed with it for 10 years, beforehand. Right. Because there were new members, people would drop off. So we explained, we talked a lot about that, and his wife had done a painting which got on the cover of James Joyce Quarterly of, this is in 95, 96. So after listening to me and getting familiar with the wake, and catching up to her husband, so this is the lawyer in the United Nations, Cecile Gross, she was an artist. So she made a painting, and at the bottom, she had all the different characters and face places where you could put your face in and be the different characters. But at the bottom, she had a list of all the main scholars of the time, Fritz Sen, McHugh, Clive Hart, all the regulars of the old ones, Joseph Campbell. And there's a nice row of books. But then it has one book there. It says Dobbs and McLuhan.
Oh.
So I made the list, or me and McLuhan, as books at the bottom of standard stuff. And so that was put in. She put it in partly as a joke, because she knows nobody knows who I am, and McLuhan was hardly known by Americans or Joyceans even. So we then put on a play and did excerpts of Finnegan's Wake, and the James Joyce Society of America came to it. That was something formed by T.S. Eliot. This was in a famous bookstore called, I don't remember what it was called. It was on 42nd Street. You can look it up. T.S. Eliot, New York bookstore. The lady who started it became famous. So Eliot was there in 48 doing his plays or something, and he joined the group or helped get it going or gave it publicity. So it was a famous old established group. They weren't part of our Finnegan's Wake group. But they found out what we were doing and they liked it, so we got put on at the James Joyce Theater place up on the west side.
Wow! So what was that? What did you perform? Was it based on the screenplay of the movie that came out?
No, we took.
It was just original script. Yeah.
Yeah, we took her painting, which had holes in it for our faces. So it'd be a picture of Shem and Sean, but it'd be blank. And anybody could put their face in the hole, but the rest of it would be your clothing, right? So It was a collage of the main characters with our individual Finnegan's Wake Society of New York members putting their face in. So each one of us picked a character, and we had to memorize stuff from them. So we just presented a dialogue among the characters, taking quotes from the book. So it wasn't imaginative. It's just that we had to memorize all these difficult lines. So the people were impressed. Well, they put it on the cover. I think it's in 94, 95. I could give you the exact date of the James Joyce Quarterly. They put the picture with the painting and the Dobbs McLuhan book at the bottom, and some of our faces in the painting as the play was presented. We didn't do it in the James Joyce Theater. We did it at the bookstore, famous bookstore upstairs, where we used to always have our sessions. Now, one interesting thing you should know. One night, a guy who was an expert, he was a Freemason, and the James Joyce Society put him on. And he was aware that people said that Joyce knew about Freemasonry, and so he started to read and get to know Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake and looking for Freemason stuff because he knew the secret codes or whatever. So finally, he was ready to go public, so he came and spoke, and I attended that one. This was put on by the James Joyce Society. And he laid out that Joyce knew all this very secret stuff, and he was really puzzled. How the hell did he get this if he wasn't a Freemason?
Who's that guy?
Freemason. I could look up. I'd have to look. I might be able to find out because he'd be listed in the. Well, let's just see if you put in James Joyce Society and Freemasons.
He published on that, did he? Or?
I think he did. Well, he's ready to speak on it, and he may have finally did something. Let me just see. So what is it? James Joyce, Freemasonry, and James Joyce Society of New York. Well, I'll just say James Joyce Society. I don't know if it's of New York. And I'll put in, let's say 1999, something like that. Yeah, here's something. Joyce and the Two-Headed Octopus.
I've read that.
You've read that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at is freely Mason symbols of Finnegan's Wake academia. So let's see, what's the name of the guy who does it? M. Darcy.
M. Darcy.
That's a woman. So it's not him. Her. So symbols of Finnegan's Wake.
Ben Stock has an article on him, but it's probably not him, eh? Like he.
No, it's not. I know Ben Stock. No, it's not him.
No, it's not him. But he's got an essay, Leopold Bloom and the Mason Connection.
Yeah, I see that. So I'm looking at one here, but it doesn't say who is Jonathan McCready. Maybe I remember Jay. I thought I was going to say John, but this could be him. We'll see who he is.
Jay Hardy. Is that?
No, might be. Jonathan McCready's too young. So is that G as in, are you looking at the Google list?
I'm just looking at JSTOR, just to see, check for papers. This is something from '94, The Woman Who Hid Inside a Clock. I haven't read that.
No, that doesn't sound like it. So, but I have to look at, the James Joyce Society of New York. Let's just put of New York. That's who it was done for, and they may have a James Joyce Society. Okay, archive. James Joyce. Do they have a search? Archive. Okay, what page in development? Events. So let's put Freemasonry and see what happens. Nothing. So I'm looking at joysociety.com if you want to look at it.
Check that out.
How much of the archives? It's got 20. It just shows events. Where is the archive? I don't see it. Okay, we can look up that.
Don't worry about that now.
Yeah. Let's keep going. So, what struck me is that he generally was shocked that Joyce had all this stuff in there, and so I checked with the Evergreens or Ion. I don't know which. How did he find out? And Ion, maybe it was Ion, said that because he was famous, people would come and visit him and want to get in with him, and so they would, tell him stuff. So an actual Freemason came to him at some point and taught him all this. Now, this would have to be before 1922 when Ulysses is finished, right? But he's famous by the teens, and Irish people would drop in. So some Freemason guy told him all this stuff. It violated the rules. And wanted to befriend Joyce. So that's how he found out. He never joined them, but he was told a lot by some guy. That's what the astroplane says.
That's an interesting question then. So could you lie on the astral plane?
Oh yeah, geez. Well, this is what's so great about Ion. See, Ion's not an entity. Right. Ion is. I don't want to go too much into Ion because I don't know how interested you are. But the thing is, Ion has, as things have unfolded, and we haven't created a credible medicine, and we have a free electricity, we have a battery or a box that makes endless electricity, which everybody on the elites knows about. They keep coming to us. Trump recently offered us $300 million so he could get in on the ground floor. It's incredible, the story of what we're doing. But this started off by accident on March 18, 2009. It took me a year to even sort of accept what I was talking to, but I just love the fact that Ion would go on for many hours. 7, 8, 10 hours. And I could talk about anything. And they had lots of stuff and new things to say. But after a year, in April 2010, one day, Carolyn was only half interested. She wouldn't stay up for the whole 7-hour thing. She'd go to bed. But she tolerated it. But then in April, Ion says, in 2010, Carolyn, we're going to tell you how to cure cancer. The answer to cancer. So they laid this stuff out for her, which was very unique, and she was amazed. And she said, wow, this is Ion's practical. And then Ion said, now we're going to give Bob something. And he said, you talk about cold fusion. Well, we're going to call it cold play, and this is how you make it. And he laid out how to make it, for fuck's sake. So we patented it. We sent it into the patent office. And they just kept writing back, we don't know what the fuck this means, And it was way different from what anybody knew. And Pons and Fleischmann were nowhere near how you do it. And you know who they are. They're the famous guys in cold fusion. And that's what's good about talking to you. You know all the fringe stuff. You know everybody. You know all that you had to know as a Generation Xer, I'll call you, right? Were you born in the 70s?
71, yeah.
Yeah, you're a Generation Xer. So
we're in the same day. It's one the same day as Neo in the Matrix. You can see from his passport. I was born the same day.
Wow. Well, what day is that?
September 13th, 71.
September 13th. I have an old friend who was born that day. He was a fucking nut. He's flaps. He's in my diaries. Anyways, he was September 13th. what were you just saying? We're talking about.
Just the ion.
Oh, Neo.
Cold fusion.
Yeah. Have you seen the article by Robert Guffey in 2000 for Paranoid Magazine about how the Matrix is about me? Ever seen that article?
No.
Oh man, you got to read that one. That's incredible. This guy, young writer, went to Long Beach University or whatever it is, and he used to listen to me on KPFK in the 90s. And what did he do? So he's listening to me in 93, 94. And then he's going to college, and he would drive to college with his buddy and play old recordings of me on David Porter on KPFK in the car. And then he didn't do that for a couple of years. Then in April 1999, he was with his friend, probably the one in the car, and he said something. This is April 19th. On April 20th, it's Hitler's birthday. Something bad's going to happen. This was Guffey's own intuition. And so he told his friend, and the next day, Columbine happened. You know, the massacre in Colorado?
Yeah. That little portal zone, like around 420, 419, 420, April 19th, April 20. That always something comes up then, right? Like that.
Well, it's getting near the important date, April 22nd. That's the big date.
Stretching up, yeah.
Yeah, it's 422, which is what my album came out, or Nelson and Dave Neufeld's album came out in 92. Anyways, on April 22nd, but a lot happens on April 22nd. So Columbine happened, and then within a day or so, his friend said, "You got to come and see this Matrix movie," which had just come out, I think, in April '99. The guy had seen it like 5 times, and Guffey wouldn't go, but eventually he was forced to go, and maybe he went right after Columbine, like the 21st or 22nd, and he's watching it, and he knows. He had just re-listened to all my recordings like a few months before, so it was all fresh in his mind again. And so he's looking at it, he says, "This is fucking about Bob," because there are all these references that only he could see. You had to know what I had said on the radio. So he wrote an article. Well, first of all, he wrote an article and sent it to Jerry. Jerry sent it to us. And Carolyn read it first, and she says, "We ought to adopt this kid. This is incredible. This kid knows." And so I got in touch with him. We became friends, and then he got it into Paranoia magazine, if you remember that magazine.
Right. Yeah.
Issue number 22, winter 2000, issue number 22.
Perfect.
And then he did a follow-up in 2003. He interviewed me. He didn't write the article. It just got posted, the transcription of the interview, where I predicted what would happen in number 3. I laid it all out, and it kind of came true. So that's my history with the Matrix.
Wait, so what was this parallel that he made between you and the Matrix?
I obviously, he called the article Synchronistic Linguistics, subtitled The Last Tetrad Manager. He had heard my Tetrad talk and how I claimed I was a Tetrad manager of the Secret Council of 10. And he used that, and he said, "This is the last human talking before the Android meme takes over." I think he knew of the Android meme from what I've been saying a year or so before. And so it's a good article for someone who doesn't know anything. He doesn't know McClone or anything, but he just couldn't miss. See, I used to be on the radio at CKLN and claim I was a black lesbian, okay? I was trying to be the bottom of society, the most suppressed people, a black lesbian on welfare. And so he said, "Oh, there's the Black Oracle. That's Bob." Or one aspect of Bob. And then there's all these other things. I can't remember them now, but there is an incredible number of synchronicities of things I said. For example, in my Up the Orphic Anti-essay, done around 96, 97, and part 2, Silencing the Virtually Solar Theater, I think you cite them, I talk about the Morpheus generation, which would become the millennials. And I said after the Cold War ended, the global tensions of the Cold War were over. So you had a new generation growing up in post-Cold War non-tensions, and basically a slack condition. So they could go back to sleep. I used to get on the radio, "We are here to drive you back to sleep." Enough of this trying to expand your awareness bullshit. It's all cliche. So we're here to drive you back to sleep. And so I called the millennials the Morpheus generation. Well, then this movie comes out, it's all about Morpheus, right?
That's interesting. Have you seen the latest Matrix that came out?
I think I did.
In that movie, I think like a subtext of that movie is Gen X waking up against the tyranny of the millennials. It's like a Gen X versus millennial subtext to it. It's interesting to watch it from that angle.
No, okay, I'll do it. I watched it, I'm pretty sure. And I said, yeah, this is about me. I'm so sick of fucking movies. So many of them are about me, which is a whole interesting drama, that I'm not that interested. So I just watched it. Yeah, it's about me. But I couldn't find, there wasn't that many people interested in it. Not that many people looked at it. So I will go back and look at it and look for whatever you say about it and see what I already had noticed before and forgot, and then maybe talk about it, because it's been around long enough for people to have seen it, right?
I mean, it's not a great movie even compared to the first one. It's not great, but it's interesting from that perspective, maybe.
Yeah, I have to see. You see, what happened? The big one was Twin Peaks was about me, and that became obvious in the summer of 1990. I didn't see it in the spring when it first happened, and I was on CKLN, but in the summer they replayed them. So I'd heard a lot about it. I like Lynch. So I started to watch the replay. And in the first sentence where he goes, Cooper's in there and he goes, well, the interesting question for me is, what is the role of Marilyn Monroe with the JFK assassination? Do you remember? That's his opening fucking line pretty well in the first episode. I go, holy shit, that's a Bob Marshall, not Bob Dobbs. That's top down, it's Bob Marshall talk. And so I started doing it, watching it, and the synchronicity was incredible. So I would talk about it every week at the end, after I watched it. I would talk to Mike Dyer and explain how it was about me. And Jerry Fialka gathered all these. So when I showed up in 93, 3 years later, he had a kid, went through them all and made them all and put them all on one tape. And the Thursday before the Monday I showed up, he had gone to a gallery showing in Venice where Lynch was at. Lynch was showing some of his paintings or something. And so Jerry gave the tapes of me talking about Twin Peaks to David Lynch. And we never heard back anything. That was that. So then 25 years later, what is it? It started in 91, 2016. Did part 3 come out? I think season 3 came out in 2016 or so.
Right.
Okay, so it's 25 years later. Did you watch it?
I didn't. No, I haven't.
Oh, you got to watch it. But, okay, I'm looking to see, okay, how is this going to be about me? I knew it would be about me, but what? And so it's 25 years later. Ion had come in the middle of that, or 2 years through the stretch. I was experiencing Ion, and it was all public. So the opening scene of Cooper 25 years later is he's talking to an Ion character through a portal. It's the opening fucking scene. And it's literally what happened to me since 91. Ion happened to me, accidentally. And Lynch knew this, for fuck's sake, and began with all about me. It goes from there. It's damn fucking incredible. And in episode 8, the weird episode, everybody got freaked out. It was a very strange episode. He's doing Rai Returns to the Plane of Essence that I've been talking about, that came from Cosmic Awareness and Dave Worcester for years. So it is so me. It was almost boring. But I enjoyed. That's a good one to say, right? What have I been doing? What's Dale Cooper been doing, or / Bob? You know, am I Bob or Dale Cooper? And you're wondering what's happened in 25 years. Well, my main thing is Ion. And that's what he began with. He was talking to the Giant, who kept appearing to him, you know, in the first seasons. And the Giant was this mysterious astral figure or something. Well, now he's in a special place, and the opening scene, interviewing the Giant about astral issues. I don't remember what they talked about, but that is fucking incredible. And if Lynch had never heard about me, it just shows you I'm the language. I'm in the language, for fuck's sake. I'm in the culture, which is where we're going to get into your essay. We're going to get into your essay about this. You start to maybe notice this. But the okay, so did I finish? So Murray.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to get into the what Joyce actually ends up saying.
Oh yeah. You see how I got a million topics, so you got to keep you on. It's not that I forgot; it's just they go all over the place. You're talking at Finning's Wake here.
No, that's good. That's good. I like that style, as you know. Right?
Yeah. You write like that. So, though you try to make order out of it. I got order, but it doesn't always get remembered and said in one talk. Okay, so Joyce said, we're talking, I don't know, normal stuff at the beginning. This is with the Evergreens in 95. And I bring up McLuhan, and he surprises me. He says, yes, I'm aware of what everybody said about me, and I appreciated McLuhan. When was this? Oh, in the 50s. Even though he's in a no time zone, he knows that we think there's time. So he says, oh, in your 50s. I said, why? He said, well, McLuhan talked about me in my own terms. He didn't put a theory in it. He didn't project anything in there. No concepts. He just looked at what was going on. And he was very close. So he really praises McLuhan. And so I'm amazed at this. And I never expected that. I never expect anybody to agree with, especially Joyce. And so we go into a lot of detail. So at some point, basically what comes across, he's a conservative. He thinks the only valid reality of art is writing and reading. He doesn't like the new media. He thinks it's silly. It doesn't lead anywhere. And so he's also very upset at what's happening to society. So I guess the point, I said, well, should we have a press conference about this? I'm starting to have a sense of urgency. Joyce needs to wake the world up. and so he says, no, that's up to you, Bob, whatever you want to do. And so he didn't jump on the urgency bandwagon. He calmed down, or got me to calm down, right? But it was incredible. So then I brought Lewis in, Wyndham Lewis. And it was the exact opposite. Everybody thinks Lewis is the old fuddy-duddy conservative trying to retrieve eye values, painting and eye stuff, and didn't like the new electric timelessness or electric time world, ear world. Well, Lewis comes on and says, if I'd only had an automatic, this is 95, whatever they called computers back then, automatic processor or something. What would they call?
Microprocessor or something, yeah.
Maybe a word processor. Maybe that was a term he used. He said, if I had a word processor, wow, could I have done a lot of stuff? And I said, so you don't have any objection to the electric technology or the digital? He said, no, it's great. So he's all enthusiastic about it all. His image is not really that. Whereas Joyce has the image of basically maybe celebrating the new media, though, there's a lot of objections. Maybe Joyce is neither pro or con, but you don't get the sense that he's a stick-in-the-mud writer. You know what I mean? I don't see him saying that new media are bad. But that's what so he came across the way Lewis is in our public bullshit image of him, and Lewis is like Joyce in our bullshit images of them. So that is a major surprise in the whole thing. And trust me to get Wyndham Lewis and Joyce talking about it. Oh, no one else would have done that. I get talking about McLuhan. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the two twins, you get to talk to each other. But
yeah.
So what do you make of that? So you said that they're kind of in an eternal space or something, and that's what.
Yeah, there's no time in the astral plane.
And then
let me tell you, I'll give you a little tidbits. Ion says that John of Patmos, when he was doing Revelation, he could see New York City. It was sitting there off the island of Patmos, where the crazy state of mind he got into, the no time. Everything is there. All that ever happens already happened, and it's already there. If you can.
Well, I was just listening by coincidence to Northrop Frye in his big lecture series on the Bible, and he was talking about exactly that Revelation is not talking about a future state. Revelation is talking about what you would normally see if you were in that state of mind all the time. Like it exists.
If you were in no time, he's saying no time.
That's right. Yeah. So
is that the 8-part series he's lecturing at the U of T about the Bible? I've watched that. Unless it's new stuff.
He's got like 25 lectures. Yeah, 20 like two semesters I think worth of it.
Oh, I may have only done one, and I did it. Maybe they had only posted the first season 10 years ago. But yeah, I've seen some of those. It's very puny. What he does about the Bible is so puny compared to Ion. We have a series, 68 hours, line by line, of the book of Revelation, including the unknown chapter 23 that Ion dropped on us. How many people, it's out there in fragments, but Ion said they put it out there. But other people say, oh, no, we put it out there. But Ion says they did. But anyways, there is this incredible extra stuff in chapter 23, which would be considered part of the Apocrypha, right? The deleted parts. But anyways, when we were doing it, Ion was pointing out the references to genetic code and all that stuff. I said, what are you talking about? They hinted at about the genetic code. This is before I understood much. And it's like in the first year. And he said, no. If you get into the Jesus Christ state of mind, or Nostradamus, or John of Patmos, you see everything, and everything is there.
Right,
so
right.
I think that's good that Fry conceptually says this, but he can't do the details like Ion. You know what I mean? He can't go into what they actually said and saw and talk about and point out where it is.
I don't know if he could, like, it's weird with him. Like, I think he's a visionary. I think he's had experiences like that, but he can't talk about it publicly. Like, he's guarded enough to know he can't talk about it, you know?
Yeah, but see, that's where McLuhan did it metaphorically. He had the guts to do it, even though he knew nobody understood him, so he got away with it, right? But he gets the kudos because he did it. He lays it out.
Yeah, he does. Fry points to it in text, so like that's the thing. I really love Northrop Frye, you know, because he does point to it in the text. So if you go off and look at where he's pointing to, you can find it there, you know.
Yeah.
So I really have a conviction that he's had those experiences. Like he even talks about that with his Blake experiences, right? But
right. Okay, so that is normal mystical experiences. Ion is something new. Now, this is the thing that you have to realize if you're going to stay in touch with Ion. This is the first time in the world ever that non-physical has spoken to humans. That's what Ion is. It's non-physical. It used to, when I first talked about it to them, I said, well, the Evergreens are 6,500 to 7,000 entities. Then there's a guy who channels something called the Willows, which is a spin-off of the Evergreens, and the Evergreens people didn't like him, but he claimed to have 293,000 entities. So I said to Ion, this is the first day or so, I don't know we haven't even got the name Ion yet. I said, I'm almost thinking I'm still talking to the Evergreens, but then I start to realize, well, maybe this isn't. And he says, I said, how many entities are you? And Ion says, take a dodecahedron, take each angle, and imagine 500 to 1,000 or something entities on each angle. Now add them up. And I say, well, it sounds like there'd be millions. And Ion says, zillions, Bob. And so I said, so you're zillions of entities? And he says, yes. Within a week, Ion then updated. They always were telling me stuff which was a half-truth compared to what they would tell me later once I got used to the half-truth. So he's saying zillions of entities. So he tells me a week or so later, actually, Bob, we are not entities. JW is not a medium. He's a large, which is a great joke. He's not a medium. He's a large, which means he's got a lot more than entities coming through him. So he says, we are not entities. We are the Guf. Look up the Guf. It's a Jewish word. It's, go on Wikipedia, look up Guf, and it's part of the Kabbalah world, I think. It's more esoteric mysticism in the Hebrew religion. So he says, we are the Guf. And the Guf is what entities who die live in. It's where everybody who dies goes to the Guf. And it's defined in Wikipedia as, Jewish definition is it's heaven where souls go. So that's accurate. So everybody goes there, Hitler, everybody. And I later told us that if you accept yourself before you die, or even after you die, you go through this judgment of yourself. If you get right with yourself, then you're allowed in the Guf. So many people are lingering. And I said, okay, what happens if you don't judge yourself? And he says, well, take this person. He just names a name, Betty Carter. Betty Carter, she died in 1683. She's still trying to get herself accepted to herself so she can go in the Guf. But there's no time. But in your reference, it's 400 years ago. So many people are lying are floating around in there and are not in the guff. But many people accept themselves and get in there. Hitler got in there, and there was a whole bunch of stuff about Hitler. But now, why am I telling you this? So that's the guff. So Ian is saying that they are the environment that you die into. Now that's revolutionary. And he says, as the Bible and all religions predicted, heaven will merge with earth, and we are non-physical. We are, quote, what you call heaven, and we have merged with earth as of now. This is new. Physical and non-physical coming together. It's going to change everything from, the archetypes of vision experiences to reality. And it was changing the structure, and the poles were flipping. And it goes into a lot of stuff that I won't go into, but it's a very radical thing. And it reminded me that at the very beginning, Ian used to say to me, Bob, we're non-physical. Yeah. And you're physical. Yeah. Well, how come you can hear us if we're non-physical? And I used to say, yeah, good question. Yeah, I guess, you're non-physical, I'm physical. How do they meet? And so I thought about that for a while, and then eventually hit me. Oh, they are not non-physical. They were non-physical. They've now merged with the physical, so I can hear them. So they go into the Dalai. They know everything about everybody. So they talk about the Dalai Lama's tradition, how sometimes they got close to non-physical, but no one ever got to non-physical and had it speak to it. In the Garden of Eden, it was there. And that's a whole other story, but which we just learned about lately. Anyways, I start to say, holy fuck, I've broken through. Wait till Znore hears about this. Can I tell Znore? No, he's not ready. Actually, I didn't know you until 6 years later. But anyways, I don't know how much I told you about Ian when we talked 6 years ago, whenever it was. But
when was it? 2018, before all the craziness. But you told me at that time. You told me at that time about the you sort of defined Ian as the environment of heaven. Which I thought was great.
That's good, because think of it. Because, I'll read your stuff, and you're doing traditional mysticism. The tradition, what's it called? Begins with P. The perpetual tradition, the...
Perennial?
What is that?
Yeah,
perennial tradition, yeah. Huxley's phrase, I think. So I say, well, as Znore and all the mystics that like Znore, or anybody else at Synch book, they got to look at this new thing. So I hadn't been running in and telling you guys, but it's there if you want to do it. I talk about this all the time with Ion on the show, and I've got good students now of Ion who get into it. So it's an incredible post-mystical, paramystical fucking dialogue we're having, way beyond what anybody else in the world is saying. But you got to be able to tolerate Ion's he's Finnegan's Wake. Digresses, jokes, swears, fucking starts teasing people, and then he gets back to serious stuff. Then you got to do the digression. It's exactly like Finnegan's Wake, as frustrating. And so I'm telling you about the meaning of the physical meaning non-physical. So a lot has happened since 2019. Ian always, after a couple of years, took a couple of years off and would not be available to the public. Carol and I would still talk to it privately, but he said, we got to, or they, it's a plural, they, people have to absorb what he's done already. It's too much. So there was always a we did 2009 to 2011, and then a break until 2014, then 2014 to 17, 3-year stretch, and then a 2-year break from March 7th to 2017 to April 2019. And now Ian spent 3 years, been straight going, but he hit the ground running in 2019. No more nice guy. Man, he just started pouring out incredible amounts of information that he was holding back on. But he knew things were coming to a head. He predicted the COVID, everything that's happening, he laid out in 2019. And including, he predicted the increased sightings of UFOs, which is a whole other story I'm not going to go into right now. So I tell you, I'm up on what's going on. I'm pretty informed, and I wouldn't be fucking around with Ion if it was stupid.
For sure.
But I have a bad reputation. And now we get to the article. So I don't know how I found your book. I think I hadn't looked at your column for a couple of years, so I decided to look at it recently, and I saw you had a book out. So I bought it, not knowing what it would be. And I see at the end, McLuhan me, or what is it? Mearshall me. I go, what the fuck? That's the secret code. He's got it right in his title. So I go and start reading the last 3 chapters, 25, 26, 27, right? Reading what you wrote. I said, holy fuck. And in the second page, you said, Bob could be the inheritor of the McLuhan mantle or something like that. I go, holy shit, this fucking guy knows. He's the first person in the world to write it up. I couldn't believe it. And some people have said it to me privately. Even Michael Edmonds said it to me. Don Thiel said it. He said, Bob, you're obviously the inheritor of the mantle, whatever that means, because I consider I'm in post-McLuhan. McLuhan doesn't work totally today. But anyways...
I said you were the McLuhan's most worthy living emissary.
Which was a pretty great statement. And I said, how would he know this? What does he know? So I read the thing. It's like 60 pages or something. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Let's have I finished this other digressions? Okay. James Joyce, I told you basically that McLuhan, Joyce agreed that, yes, the thunders are about technology, which is amazing. Who in the Joycean world believes that, other than Eric people who understand McLuhan. And so it was a big validation. And I think that's why most of the people who heard it in Murray's house, a couple of weeks after this happened in 95, didn't know about McLuhan and didn't know what I was talking about. So it just went over their heads. But Murray knew a little bit, and he realized, this is pretty good, Bob, but I can't believe it. How the hell can you talk to James Joyce? Most humans don't believe that could happen, right? And I may not have been talking to Joyce. We don't know what we're talking to.
Well, it's right. It's right in the wake, right? Like in the wake, there's a huge séance in the third book as well, right? So it's pretty canonical, if you want to say it. Yeah.
Yes, but here, more details. Have you read Grace Eckley? You ever read her books on Joyce? She did one on W.T. Stead, who was the big influence on Joyce when he was a kid.
Okay, I know that book, yeah.
Yeah, well, Stead was the journalist in 1885 in London, who revealed the prostitution bullshit. How everybody was, ripping off women and children. The whole abuse, Me Too stuff was happening. And this guy, W.T. Stead, was a journalist, and he exposed it. And he got in big shit because he went and hung out with the prostitutes to see it. So he got accused of being hypocritical. He was fucking the prostitutes too. But he did it as a journalist. And they put him in jail. It's an amazing story. W.T. Stead, S-T-E-A-D. And he became part of the Fabian socialist world, Bernard Shaw and all those guys that led into Theosophy. So he created the first Reader's Digest. He with the Telegraph news information flood, he used to put out a monthly or something showing all the good articles that you should know about, so people would subscribe to him, just like Reader's Digest later. So he became very big, but he then got into going to mediums, and that ruined his reputation, and he died. And Joyce, who we found out through the Evergreens, was into Ion, that he was into mediums. And the founder of Penn, the author's thing, in 1926, a woman, she's written about in the book W.T. Stead by Grace Eckley, and I have done an interview with her, which you can listen to sometime. She says that the woman who created Penn was a medium herself, and Joyce knew her. And there's a picture of Joyce at an early Penn meeting in the 20s or 30s. But he would go to her and talk to people. So he talked to Stead. Huh. So Joyce was just like me, so to speak. He engaged in everything, including mediums. Now, it came through with Ion that Nora, as a Catholic girl from Ireland, couldn't tolerate the idea that Joyce was talking to the dead. That spooked her out. So she believed that he was having an affair and accepted that he was having affairs, and he was always taking off and disappearing and coming back. She really knew he was doing the mediums, but she couldn't believe it that way. So she said, he's having affairs, and she didn't mind that. And that's how she accepted it. She accepted Joyce's adultery, which is an amazing story, right?
So when would that be? When Joyce...
In the 20s and 30s.
When he was in Trieste, or...
No, he's in Paris.
In Paris at the time, okay. Oh, 20s, yeah, okay.
Yeah, he starts in 22, but he's So there's all this mediumship in Finneg's Wake, especially the mediumship of Oscar Wilde, which is the famous. Yeah, he quoted that, but the whole thing is like a seance.
Well, then there's the influence of Yeats's Vision, right? Which is all the same thing, and that was a massive influence on the Wake. Yeah.
That's right. They all were. The four evangelists are Lewis, Pound, Eliot, and Yeats. The fifth, the donkey, the Logos, is either one of them or Joyce. It rotates. It's like my chart. I've got 5 people, 5 sections, but I call them quadrants. It's 4 sections, but they're 5 because the Dobbs quadrant swallows them all. So Joyce or the Wake swallows them all, so he's in among the interaction of them, but so much of each writer of the men of 1914 is in the Wake, around the evangelists in different parts. It's a big
that makes
part
sense. He's the ass, right? Like that's the
the Logos.
That's the one who introduces into the mysteries, right? Like,
and so the more you look into mediumship, the verboten world that the McClunites hate me for talking about, or they don't say hate me, but they discount me. They don't recognize that's McClune. McClune went to the Evergreens. Did you ever see talk about that?
No.
Yeah, he in 74. I read his son's article in the James Joyce Quarterly on the thunders. It was the beginning of his writing on everything, with the 5 parts of rhetoric and the 4 levels of exegesis. It's an amazing essay, and it's based on his dialogues with Marshall. So I called up Marshall and congratulated his son, and then we got to talk about other stuff. And I was telling him that I was living on bananas. I was eating a lot of bananas. And he says, "Oh, no, you can't do that. Edgar Casey says eating bananas like that is bad for you." And I'm thinking, fuck, he quotes Edgar Casey. What the hell? So I didn't protest. I just made note of that. I said, wow. And then when I was living in Toronto from 77 on, I got to know him a lot. And a good guy to talk about this stuff is Scott Taylor. Now, we have, in the centenary of 2011, me and Andrew Crystal did a whole thing all year long on McLuhan, on the centenary. And Ion came in. And then Ion would bring Marshall and Corinne in. And you should hear those things. What is secret? And I'll tell you one of the main things that McLuhan through Ion said was the basic root of his symbolism. Okay, he's a symbolist in many levels. The basic symbolism in all his work is the moon and the sun.
Well, the moon child, right? Like that, yeah.
What'd you say? The moon what?
The moon child, right? Like that's the.
Oh yeah, you got the moon child, right? No, but I wasn't thinking of that. But if you look at interior landscape, in the essays, the 2 essays in 53 on Joyce, he talks about the basic moon versus the sun, the space people versus the time people. The moon is time, the sun is daylight and space. Yeah. And so, but I kind of knew that. I knew that, but I didn't know it was the basic symbolism. But Ion said this, or McLuhan said it. I have to listen to it because it gets mixed up. Sometimes Ion will say what McLuhan's saying. Other times McLuhan is talking directly to us. But when he said that, I go, wow, that is. I went and reread the thing in the interior landscape. I said, that is so correct. That shows you there's something real going on with Ion. You know what I mean? Because the sun moon is a big deal, and he used to say that Northrop Frye was the sun. That meant Marshall was the moon, and then
that makes sense.
Your moon child. Yeah.
Well, if you have my book, it's like that's the cover, the front and back cover is the sun and the moon, from that symbolism. Yeah,
the 2 discs, one in the back is the sun with the sea.
That's the moon. Yeah, that's the moon. Like the.
So the sun is the stars. Oh, okay.
The sun is the first one at the front.
With the points. Okay, and the spirals. Okay, and then why would I don't know, just the sun looks simpler on the back, but it's just the moon. Well, that's pretty good. You got it right there, man. Did you know that? Did you know you're
Yeah, talking about the sun and the moon through the
Did we talk about it in the McLuhan article? I don't know if you do. I mean, you might.
I don't know. Yeah, it might be there. It might be the other ones as well.
Okay, now, so we know that basic symbolism, and then you might see it in McLuhan. So that's traditional occult knowledge, call it. But Ion takes it way further. Whole new fucking stuff about it all. It's incredible. Anyways, that's Ion. The moon and sun. So when I accidentally evoked Ion on March 18th, the day after St. Patrick's Day, it's what happened is, I've told you the story, but just for the record, the night before, JW calls me up, and he's having ghosts in his house. And he says, you know a Dr. Beater? And I said, yes. He said, well, he came to me as a ghost and said, say hi to Bob. And I don't know who he is. So who is he? So I explained it. So I get the idea that these ghosts, there's 100 of them around JW in his home, are talking to him. And I said, well, maybe this is the Evergreens, because they stopped coming through Michael Brake Reed 4.5 years earlier. So I said, I want to talk to them. Let's do it next day. So on the 18th, we put on a speakerphone, and JW's there. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, how do I talk to the ghost? If they're in his house, would I yell through the speakerphone at the ghost? And is he going to hear them? So I realized I didn't know what to do. So I just said, well, I don't know what to do. Let's just be quiet. And 30 seconds of quiet. And then JW's voice, in retrospect, was different, but it was just his voice to me. And the voice says, he says something, I won't say it out loud. He says something about his daughter, Mary McLuhan. And I was working with Mary at the time, and I was the only one who knew that, as far as I know. I don't think Mary was telling anybody else. But she was telling me a lot of personal stuff. So I knew that. And this voice opens by saying this about Mary. I go, holy shit. And as a matter of fact, it didn't begin that way. Sorry. It began with him talking with the night before. But then after 20 minutes, I'm thinking, this is pretty good. I wonder if I can talk to people like I did with the Evergreens. And, I got hours with McLuhan through the Evergreens. So with the Evergreens, Michael, who's in trance, his wife, Ellie, would say, Bob would like to locate Marshall McLuhan. Here's his birth date, death date, his address or something, if he was dead, where he had lived. That was a traditional method. So after 20 minutes, half an hour, I say, well, let's see if I can do like the Evergreen. So I started to think McLuhan. So I said, I would like to speak to, and before I could say the name, the voice starts talking about Mary and says this very personal thing. I go, holy shit, that's McLuhan, or something like it. And so then I started interviewing this thing, thinking it's McLuhan, and it presented itself exactly the way McLuhan would talk, plus some other little wrinkles. And so I thought, wow, this is amazing. That is as close to McLuhan as I would want to get, probably, or as I could get. But that's how it began. McLuhan was the first guy to come through. So later, I'm telling Mary all this stuff, and she eventually had a private session with Ion, but she was looking through her stuff, 2012, 2013, and she came across Evergreen's summation of an interview or a session. And she read it. She was amazed. So she calls me up and says, look, my mother and some other people in the family, not Marshall, went to the Evergreens and talked about everybody in the family. And it was all transcribed. She says, I'm reading it. She says, I wasn't there. I was in California. But they all went to this thing called Evergreens that you've talked about. And there's stuff about Marshall here. So she said she was going to send it to me, maybe, but she never did. So I never saw it. But that was the first proof of something that happened back in 95. Right around the time, in April 95, the Evergreens are coming to Toronto. So as a joke or a probe, I called up Corinne, who I hadn't talked to since 1980, December 1980, when I did the archives for a couple months with her. I helped her organize the archives. And I hadn't talked to her then. But one night when we were driving home, she told me how Marshall would come to her and talk to her in the kitchen. And that Marshall told her that he should have written more about Jesus. So that was interesting. That's the main thing she told me. And I think she was surprised at that, or maybe she wasn't. We didn't go into it too much. But I thought I kept that in mind. Okay, so that's 1980. So 1995. So 15 years later, I call her up. I said, the evergreens are coming. They're a medium, and I've talked to Marshall through them, and I'm going to talk to him again. Do you have any questions for him? And she's a cool lady because she told me about talking to him. So she said, that's interesting. She says, well, I know about the evergreens. I still get their pamphlets and, announcements, newsletter. And I don't recall if she said I talked to them or I used them, went to them. I don't know if she said that. She may have, but I just filed it away, didn't think much of it. And then she said, no, I'm not interested in talking to Marshall. And that was that. Later, okay, what happened next? I was talking to Mark Stewart, his secretary. And Mark really knew McLuhan. And she tells me that Corinne had a boyfriend.
Oh.
This is, she died in 2008. So this is in the 90s. And he was the guy who owned In on the Park, whoever that was. But that's a business, a hotel or something in Toronto. And so she was wondering whether to marry him. And so she talked to Marg about this. And Marg told me that eventually she decided not to marry him. So she didn't. But she said to Marg, she said, Marshall never loved me. He didn't love anybody. He loved his work. And that was all that was important. And so she felt like she had not had love in some way. And so she thought this guy was going to give it to her, but she didn't do it. Maybe she sobered up and realized Marshall did love her. I don't know. But I never got the details later on that, but she didn't marry him. But that was an incredible statement that she told Mark Stewart. Now, when the DVD came out, Corinne says, if you've ever seen it, Southern Press or News Service put it out in the 90s when CD-ROM, it was a CD-ROM. And there's a lot of good stuff on there. But it has Corinne talking, and she says, Marshall, he loved the idea of being a family man. He wasn't a family man, but he loved the idea of being one. So she says, she admits that. But when you talk to Mary and the kids, mainly Mary for me, she said, Mary said, my father, Corinne was the one who ran the house, and everybody knows about that. That's in the biographies, and everybody dealt with Corinne, and she was a wonderful mother. And Mary said, our father was a guy who sat on the couch or lay out on the couch all the time reading poetry. That's what their father was, a guy, like a homeless guy living at their home doing poetry.
Which I can relate, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of McLuhan, certain kind of people. Slackers could relate to that, we'll say. Sub-geniuses. So that was interesting. She was very honest about Marshall and about his whole thing. And so that, I see, he wasn't a family man. He was loving the idea of the family. He didn't have normal emotional father love things, whatever it was. He was I remember when he died, Stephanie was a journalist in New York, and after a couple of years, she decided to make a documentary because she looked into her father. Said, "Who is this guy that everybody's making a big deal out of?" And she says, "I started reading him. I said, wow, this guy said a lot of good stuff." So she decided to make a documentary, but that's it. She didn't know what her father said. And Mary, she was at the University of Windsor, I think, and then she finished and went out to Banff. Was working out at the Banff. A lot of kids would do Banff, job at the Banff Hotel or something in the summer. Right. And while she was out there, she decided not to go back to Toronto. She went to San Francisco. He checked down there. This is like 65. And she gets down there and she got no money. So she calls her father, her mother, and says, "Hey, I'm down here. I didn't come home, but hey, send me some money." And she told me all this. And they said, no. There's a guy named Howard Gossage. Go to his place, knock on the door, say who you are. He'll look after you. Now, Gossage is the ad man that made McLuhan famous, right? You know who that is. Sure, Howard Gossage. So she knocks on the door, and they take her in, and she lives there for a couple of years. Well, in 66, whenever McLuhan's on the cover of Newsweek magazine, which I think is March 66, not 67, though it might be 67, I can't remember. He was supposed to be on the cover of Time in the negotiations, but it never happened. So he got on the cover of Newsweek. So she's walking to work, whatever she was doing in 66, and she comes to a newsstand. There's a picture of her father on the cover of Newsweek saying, what if he's right? And she said it was the strangest experience because she didn't know her father would burst on the scene like that. She didn't really know what he was doing, didn't care. Like any kid, they don't care about their parents, right, what they're doing. Sure. And she found it totally hilarious. It's very cute that the whole world was wondering if her father was right. Some guy that read poetry and she heard different things from him, but not much or something. And then everybody wonders what he's had to say if he's right. I mean, what if it's like you finding your brother, son, I don't know if you got a brother or some relative. All of a sudden the world wants to know, you're a fucking brother. No, it's Znore's brother. What if he's right? So I thought that was the cutest story of her personal experience of fame that she didn't see coming,
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so she got married shortly after that in late 66. And then she got divorced in the early 70s. So when I became friends with her, she gave me her correspondence with Marshall in the early 70s when she was contemplating divorce. And Marshall, this is the private Marshall. He's telling her it's no media coolness. He's saying nuclear war is going to happen. The elites don't know what they're doing with the media. They're going to cause a fucking accident because they don't understand the effects and all this. And he was telling her, you don't want to get divorced. There's too much shit coming. And he was really, yelling at her not to get divorced and very strict about it all. And that's the private Marshall.
Well, that's the Catholic side coming in.
Yeah, or not even Catholic, the family man.
I guess, yeah.
I don't know if I ever told you, George Thompson, his aide for many years, told me, once we got talking about Marshall's Catholicism, and I said, I don't know the order. In my mind, I brought it up, but maybe he did. I said, I just tentatively said, Marshall was a different kind of Catholic. He goes, and George immediately says, he wasn't a Catholic. I watched him. This guy he was not a Catholic. You put up 1,000 Catholics, not like any of them, and I know what he did and what he said and what he was interested in. He was not a Catholic. And I thought, wow. So me and George bonded on that secret knowledge that he wasn't a Catholic. So the only guy who kind of intuits that, there's two of them, is Bruce Powell. He trying to point out the Gnostic side or mystical side of McLuhan. And when he spoke about it at the McLuhan Festival in 2004, put on by Bill Marshall, who created the Toronto Festival, he then did the McLuhan thing for a year or two, and he tried to get going with that. It didn't work. But Bruce gave up and gave his mystical McLuhan talk, and Eric walked out of it.
Really?
Yes, and Bruce and I talked about it. That's typical. Eric didn't agree with Bruce's view of that. But the other guy who knows even more about it is Scott Taylor. But he won't talk about it too much. But Scott Taylor came on our centenary several times and talked to McLuhan, talked to Ion about all this stuff. It's really interesting. And go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I'm just interrupting. Do you know anything about his McLuhan's conversion experience? Like that sounds like, just from the hints that he gives, it sounds like a whole series of crazy synchronistic experiences that he had.
That he, look at Eric. He says, my father never, Eric publicly says, it may be private too, he says, my father never explained what the signs were.
Yeah.
And I bet you it was, he didn't want to talk about it. It was different. He probably portaled. I've done a lot on Marshall through Ion. Marshall had his first portaling. Ion says he portaled quite young, went to another world. And I said, well, where did this happen? When he was in Vancouver. And I said, he was not out in Vancouver when he was young. I said, he was stuck in a poor house in Winnipeg. Well, years later, when I got access to the archives, I found letters. And there he was. He did go out to Vancouver when he was a teenager or something with his mother. And you go from cold Winnipeg to utopian British Columbia. You're going to have a mystical experience, right?
Yeah, I did.
I think he got zapped. He went out to this beautiful place after being in horrible Winnipeg, and it just transported him to another world. And so he was aware of that stuff. And I don't mind saying this stuff now. Half the McLuhans are all fucking dead. They all died, and there's a few left. But I don't know if I should say this, but fuck it. He had 3 families, and I don't know where the other 2 were in other worlds, but he had 3 families. McLuhan. There's a fucker.
through his portaling, you mean?
Yeah, or not. I didn't go into it. It just said he had 3 families, and I assumed, I was rather surprised, and I didn't pursue it, and I knew we couldn't really talk about it in public, so I put it aside, and I can't remember if I went back and got more details. But the main thing for me, the validation, as much as you can get validation, is the Vancouver thing. When I found out that years later, that he had gone to Vancouver. And so I probably said to Ian, I found out you're right. He did go to Vancouver. He probably got transported. And Ian says, at least. Ian goes, at least he got transported. At least that, of course, being out in Vancouver. So I'm just reading a book now called, there's a guy named Greg Betts, B-E-T-T-S. He's a pretty good art critic, and he's knowledgeable about McLuhan. He gets the right quotes of McLuhan that you can find. He did a book on Vancouver from 59 to 75, and all the art experimentation that went on there once Ginsberg and those guys showed up in the early 60s and Robert and so I bought it, and it's all about the interesting. McLuhan spoke there. He did his Medium as a Message supposedly in 58 at some radio broadcasters conference. Then he's back there in 61 or so, and he does another talk. Then he's there in 64 with Gerd Stern. And there's a whole history of McLuhan in Vancouver stimulating a lot. Bill Bissett and B.P. Nickel and other people like that, the Concrete Poet guys. So this guy, Jeff Betts, he's from Vancouver, so he's writing a history of the art world from 59 to 75 it's called Finding Nothing, and that's a multi-leveled headline. And it's very interesting that the creativity going on there. It looks like he's trying to balance off whatever stuff people thought happened in Toronto or Yorkville or something. The Toronto mythology, the Vancouver stuff is not understood. So I'm just talking about this guy sees the important role of McLuhan in Vancouver. So if you know this portal stuff, he started to have a special relationship with Vancouver when he was young. And there's where he said the Medium is a Message and other things. So that's an interesting history. So I recommend the book by Greg Betts, B-E-T-T-S, Finding Nothing. It's good history of Canadian art on the West Coast and what those guys did. There's another good book called Counterblasting Canada by a bunch of people, including him, talking about Wilfred Watson and Sheila Watson and McLuhan and the Wyndham Lewis influence of that part of Canadian creativity. And he has a very important quote in there. And a guy named Adam Lauder, L-A-U-D-E-R, has announced a book, and he's doing information art, young Canadian artists who were influenced by McLuhan. So I said, I'm going to get your book, Adam, but if you don't have that one quote in there that Greg Betts has, your book's being tossed. You have to have one quote. I'm not saying what it is. Someday I'll talk to you about it once the game is over. But Greg Betts is pretty good. You know what I mean? He has the quote in his essay, Counterblasting Canada. So maybe if Adam Lauder, he's written the book. It's too late now. It's coming out soon. But he could go now look up that book and see if he can find it and guess it. Okay, that's all a side thing about Vancouver and McLuhan's different kind of mysticism.
So this is a question. When the evergreens are ion or through different mediums are tapping into these people, right? Like it's sort of the seance model, right? Would you consider that the same space as when people come to you in a dream? Because I've had that. I've had a dream with Joyce where I met Joyce and we talked. But of course, I just think it's my own. Like, who knows what it is?
I know what you mean. But see, here's the point: we learn more from Ian. We learn what no one else probably has ever said in human history. Ion says, when you sleep, he says, first, no human has ever slept. When you sleep, you go to a parallel world. Right. Your consciousness is sort of fed up with the 12 hours of day experience. It wants relief from it. So it goes to another world. Right. So you're doing lots of stuff, and you did meet Joyce, and the dreams are very minor distortions of your after image of the experience. You'd have to listen to a particular recording where Ion explains what dreams are in relation to what you actually do. So you've never heard that idea, that no human has ever slept. And the dream thing is always real. So people are always asking Ion, well, I had this dream, and blah, blah, blah. He said, you didn't dream it. You had that experience, and you did meet so-and-so, and you did do this and that. So that's a new